Alright, so here we are again. The issue we're coming across is tyre fitment, wheel and tyre fitment. So there's a couple of ways you can figure out how to get your bug to sit right, to get the right stance. One is to order wheels to fit your car. Well, that would be the smart way of doing things. Here at Dust Customs, we never do the easy way. We always go with the hard way. So what we're going to do, rather than order new wheels and tyres to fit the setup, is we're going to change the beam width to fit the wheels and tyres to fit the setup. The reason being is that I really like the wheels that I've got. We're pretty happy with the stance that we got. The rear looks good, the front looks good. I'm just going to have steering issues to go lower, so we're going to narrow the beam. I mean, I was planning on building a different beam for this car anyway, because the one that's in it, look, it's not great. It's, the ratchets are all cactus, and I'm going to do what do they call this one? It's like the grub screw narrowing style. I mean, it's a bit of a shame. This thing's all wheel aligned and everything's ready to drive, but of course, we're not happy with that. So here we go. So here's the beam in question. This one has been narrowed. It's a 2-inch narrowed beam. Works great. Now the biggest issue obviously is my wheel fitment. It just sticks my wheel out. I reckon if I can gain another inch, I'll be in there. I'll be in the ballpark. So I'm not going to use this beam. I'm going to leave this beam alone. It's a 2-inch narrowed beam. I'm going to leave it. What I'm going to do is coming over. Oh, there's Carlin's ute. I've got this beam, which came with that car, but I've since scored another beam, so I'm not worried about chopping this one up, and I'm going to hack this one up and take 4 inches out of it. Right, so the issue is, with a ball joint beam, the bottom tube and the top tube are different sizes. The bottom tube from about here flares out to a larger bearing in there. So I can't just make my own beam. I've got to, you can get different size tubes and weld them together. It looks pretty hacked once it's done. That's how most of them come. I've got tube to replace the top. What I've got is this stuff over here. This is a chromoly tube. Now they're already marked to narrow 2 inches. I've got a bunch of these. I ordered a bunch, and you can see it's 2 inches narrower. I've got these for the kingpin setup. I've got plates cut for the sides for a kingpin setup. I don't have them for this setup. I just don't have them. So I have to reinvent the wheel here and try and make somehow a setup for this. So I'll kind of take you along for the ride. I haven't done this. I mean, I've narrowed beams before, but I haven't done this before, where I'm trying to put a new tube in the top, retain the bottom, make the sides work, and go 4 inches instead of 2 inches. So it's a bit of a learning curve. Look, I'm no expert at these things. I just kind of go with the flow and do it. So I'm planning on making mistakes, but I'll sure try and figure out how to fix them as well. So here we go. All right, so after kind of thinking about it a bit, I'm going to try and reuse these. I probably could make some out of some square stock or something, but I'm pretty sure I can. I've done it before, got them off and reused them. I'm not too worried about trying to save the top, so I could probably just hack at it. The bottom, I'll just try and cut these welds off fairly neatly. And the bottom, I'm going to try and leave on the tube. I'll cut the middle out of the bottom. I'll cut 4 inches out of the middle and bring it into an adjuster. And I'll leave these outer, so that way none of the bearings and that on the outer get damaged or fucked up. This will all be welded. It's welded on there really good. Whereas the top, I mean, it's a bit hard to say, but it looks like it's only welded kind of through there. I mean, the other side you can kind of see it too. Maybe only through the top section. I mean, I can cut that, hack it, bash it, get it out. I'm not trying to save the top bit. All I'll be using out of the top is the springs. But the bottom, I'll leave it attached, cut that off there, and then bring it together, bring it in like that. So I'll start cutting and just see how we go. Righto, so I've kind of started hacking into there, cut into there, and I've just used the Recipro and cut straight through there. So I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm giving it a go. Let's see how we go. All right, so I've cut this thing apart. I'm going to grind all those bits out. I'm trying to do it basically just save on components. Like I said, I'm replacing the whole top tube with a solid one, but I need to save on this bottom tube, so that's going to be my next big issue. All right, so I managed to peel the top beam out of there, so I'll be able to reuse them. They'll be real neat. Still got to get it out of there. That's going to be fun, and I've got to cut them off the bottom. And I realised I do need to move them out because I'm trying to save on. Thing is, if I move them out, see, it's all the thing. If I move them out, the bearings are going to be fucked in there. I was trying to reuse the bearings because they always run better with a bearing rather than a bush. So, you know, let's see how we go. Okay, fellas. Well, I managed to get the two clamps off and in good nick so I can weld them back on. They're not butchered. Managed to save on the beam so I can grind it back. May have to put a little bit of weld in. I might have gone a little deep on some of the cuts. Now I've got to try and figure out the rest. Okay, so here's where we're at. The bottom tube's still attached. This is the one with the flared ends to suit the ball joint beam. Top tube I'm going to replace with a bit of chromoly tube that's the right size that I sourced. It's actually for making racing roll cages and whatnot, but it's the right dimensions for the bushes and whatnot. I'm going to cut 4 inches out of the middle here, and then I'll weld in my adjuster, which is this bad boy here. So you can see how this one is for the ball joint beam. It has the step, whereas the other one, which is for the kingpin beam, doesn't. It's a square like that. So make sure you got the right ones for the right beam. The springs will not fit in the wrong one. Right, so this bad boy, I'll cut that. I'll cut 4 inches out. I'll actually have to cut, I think these are 2 inch wide, 50 mil. So I'll actually have to cut I'll have to cut 6 inches out. So that way when I weld that in, it's a 4 inch narrow. And what I was planning on doing on the top one, so I'm not actually cutting the tube in half, I was just going to remove this bracket off the weld-in adjuster and drill 2 holes in there and slot it like that. And then fit the adjuster in through the end. It actually, I got to machine it down a little bit to fit in there. It fits, but only just. And then that way I've got the structural integrity of a solid pipe. I haven't cut it in half and re-welded it. Then obviously I've got to punch the ends out, get them gone. And I think what I'm going to do here is cut the risers off and actually weld in a solid piece of 10 mil plate. I might even do it so they take a straight shock. I don't think you have to have it to have this, you know, the eye and pin shock. All right, I'll get into it. So you can see what I've done here is I've marked center, and then I measured this, it was 50 mil. So to take 4 inches out, I need to take 6 inches out and add that in, and that'll give me my 4 inch narrowed beam. The best way I've found to mark the circle around here, some guys use masking tape. I find that if I get a hose clamp, it kind of keeps it flat on there and I can get a true circle around, and then obviously I just mark it with my white pen, mark there, cut it out. And then I'll have 2 pieces that I can work with. You know, hopefully it'll make it a bit easier to punch that out. Let's see how we go. Okay, so I've got it cut in half. I've cut my big chunk out of the middle. That's it right there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my Recipro to cut this off the outside here. I'm hoping that I can cut enough through the weld that I can punch it out. I'm also going to remove the steering stop. That won't be on a 4 inch narrow beam. I won't be using that at all. It'll just get in the way. And yeah. All right, so here's where I get to cheat a little bit. So I made this stand up previously, look back at my earlier videos when I made a single airbag beam. So it's basically just a rusty old bulkhead that I've put on an engine stand. And that way I can get it all centered up and held square. And by not cutting this top tube, it keeps everything straight. So in theory, it should all be straight. Now what I'll do is I'll probably get a couple of tacks on these just to hold them there. And then I'll pull it all off, and I normally put a piece of angle iron in behind there just to make sure that one's all straight. And let's get a couple of tacks on it and see how it looks.